My cultural immersion project is on individuals experiencing housing insecurity in DuPage County and Western Cook County in Illinois. I picked this group because I believe that um, housing, basic housing and safety is a basic right for all. My area is not very diverse, and I felt that individuals who are facing housing insecurity are more than likely marginalized group. And I wanted to better understand who was in that group and how they got there. Additionally, I wanted to have access to people that I could actually meet and learn more about their stories and have that kind of personal experience. My own personal experience of housing insecurity came about in 2009 during the housing crisis, and my husband and I found ourselves in financial difficulty because of job loss, and we're afraid that we were going to lose our home. It was one of the scariest things I'd ever experienced, and I can't imagine what it's like for people who are undergoing this on a complete basis. I also wanted something that I could continue to be part of and volunteer in and have ongoing advocacy going forward after the assignment. So who in America is facing housing insecurity? About almost 600,000 people nationally on a daily basis are in the streets or in shelters of some kind. In Illinois, that's a number of about a little over 10,000. And here in my direct area, that's about 700 people a day. We know that 70% of that group is individuals and 30% are families with children. And the profile in general tends to be 61% male and 52% Black and Indigenous and people of color. Beds Plus, which is the group that I'll talk about later that I'm working with, mirrors that profile. There are 20 people in the facility that I volunteer in, and they in fact are about 60% male and around 50% Black and Indigenous people of color. Societal generalizations about people who are homeless or who are experiencing that insecurity is that they all have mental health or substance abuse issues, that they're homeless because they're lazy, they're not trying hard enough. And the one that's most bothersome to me is that people experiencing homelessness are best helped when they're required to demonstrate their desire to stop being homeless, if they get the addiction help that they need, if they get the counseling or they get a job, then they deserve to be helped. The actual lived experience of these people is that about 25% have mental health issues, 30% substance issues. So they are part of that community, but not the majority. Housing First approach, which is a national approach to housing insecurity, says you need to first help people with housing and stabilize their housing before you can really do anything else, any other kind of treatment. So the statistics say, no, you don't force people to do some other kind of treatment before housing, you do housing first. The other thing about them being lazy, in one of the documentaries that I watched, I thought it was interesting because the people who were actually going through the experience said, we do everything that you do. It takes us a lot longer and it's a lot more complicated. So just to go to the bathroom in the morning, just to secure food, to get any kind of hygiene, to get rest, all of those things that we just take for granted are more difficult for this community. So the things that I did as part of this project, Beds Plus is an organization locally that addresses housing insecurity for our population. I did do their online Zoom orientation, and as a result of that, felt I really did want to go ahead and work with them. Very interesting to learn about what they're doing, how they're addressing things for our community. I also watched a Netflix documentary called Lead Me Home, watched a YouTube video of a panel discussion from Chicago, Faces of Homelessness, about photography of people in our area that are homeless and how that art is being used to humanize people. My bulk of my work on this assignment was as a volunteer at the Beds Plus long-term apartment facility in LaGrange, where to date I've done 3 4-hour shifts at their front desk reception area. And finally, I did do an interview with Erin Molick, who is the Director of Development for Beds Plus, which was very helpful in learning a little bit more about this community. So the panel discussion that I listened to was kind of my first dip into actually hearing people who've been homeless talk about what that's like for them. And so starting to get a sense of that population. The panel members were aldermen for an area called Andersonville here in Chicago, which contains our largest homeless tent city. It's an area that I'm very familiar with. Both my children live there. And every time I turn onto Lawrence Avenue off of Lakeshore Drive, I pass through Tent City. It's very organized. And I learned through this discussion, they're in complete contact with their alderman, who was in this video, and being helped with all of their needs as a community. They even have a mayor. Additionally, 2 of the people on the panel had their own experiences of homelessness for very different reasons, one for domestic violence and one for loss of their home through foreclosure, but it led them both into a homelessness and housing insecurity situation. So it was a good first start in just looking at people who are actually going through this kind of difficulty. Secondly, I watched a documentary, a recent documentary from 2021 called Lead Me Home, which reviews housing insecurity in Hollywood, which is part of Los Angeles, one of the richest places on the planet. They have a lot of permanent housing there. However, the rate of homelessness is so significant they can't keep up with it. One of the quotes from that documentary, and again, it was really in-depth interviews with people who were experiencing this, talking about what led them there, what their hopes were. But they talked about the fact that here they are in one of the richest places on earth. And, people, they say to those people, people are dying in your front yard, and your worry is that it doesn't look nice. So when I talked to the Director of Development for Beds Plus, had an interesting discussion about their approach. They do follow the Housing First national strategy. So before they do anything else, they sit down and work with individuals on a case-by-case basis. Each person has a case manager. They focus first on stabilizing their housing. Once that's stabilized and they're in permanent housing of some kind, then they start to work with them on their additional physical health, mental health, employment needs, the other things that they need. The other thing that goes along with that initial housing is always food security. They really work from a place of meeting people where they're at. They don't try to force people into anything. I was very encouraged to learn that they know our long-term homeless people in the area, of which I found out there are 35 approximately. They know where they stay. They contact them on a weekly basis. They bring them things like something to eat or water and just talk to them with the hope that at some point they will seek permanent housing. They always are looking to provide long-term support. So, they move people initially into short-term situations. They no longer do emergency shelter at all. That is continued to be done in our area by some of the churches. But they're really looking to get people into long-term situations. They have the apartment complex where I work. They have hotels, and they have about 140 properties throughout the area. And people pay what they can as they move through this process. Their success rate is very high. 85 to 90% of their clients exit into stationary housing, which is very encouraging. Currently, their resources are good. We have, again, I was very encouraged to hear this, that we have excellent fundraising in the community and support in the community. They are a little bit concerned because the support that was previously available because of the pandemic is in the process of being withdrawn, but feel confident that they can replace it. So when thinking about this population and counseling, got to think about what people have been through once they get to the point where they can actually, are ready to do counseling. Remember, we're getting the housing stabilized first. But this is a group that has been through, individuals have been through a great deal. They don't have a lot of trust in people frequently because things have fallen through. It's been very difficult to work with the system. And so for counselors working with individuals who have gone through housing insecurity, it's critical that they build relationship, and trust is the cornerstone of that. Part of trust is making sure that there's consistency in the person that's working with the individual, because so many times they start working with someone, that person leaves, they're, get kind of passed around. And in particular, it is important to start with really allowing that person to tell and to really hearing their story. And it, the ins and outs of it frequently are very complex. And they haven't had an opportunity to just really talk through what has happened. And so narrative therapy is a great place to start with individuals in this situation. Also important to engage that person as a collaborator in their care, as opposed to just telling them, here's what you need to do. And that again stems from the fact that in this entire process, the frequency with which individuals are directed to what to do is very high. It is easy to stop feeling as if you have a say in your own life. So really making sure that we're collaborating and working with that individual. Reminder that there are special barriers for this group, and that there's a lot of poverty. Things as simple as transportation can be very difficult, so getting to and from appointments. And frequently there's limited social support. Having been in this situation, they're away from family contact, or lack of family contact or withdrawal of family contact has driven them into homelessness. Aaron Molek mentioned the fact that at Beds Plus in LaGrange, there is a broad range of mental health issues, a lot of anxiety and depression, and there is some psychosis, but she said that is a very small percentage. And she said frequently the anxiety and depression actually stems from the fact of being homeless, which was not a surprise. So what did I do? As I said, I spent time volunteering as front desk receptionist for the facility that houses 20 residents. As I mentioned, that does mirror, oops, let's go back. It does mirror the national profile of being primarily men, or majority men, 60%, and primarily over 50% Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I did get to interact with the residents, in a short time frame, but actually have conversations, talk to them as they're picking up their mail. They would ask me things, and share things about their situations, their excitement around getting a voucher to move into a less restrictive facility. And just sometimes talked about how thankful they were for their shelter there at the apartment facility. I fielded calls from people who are either looking for emergency shelter or trying to understand what help was available to them for shelter, among other things. So there's a lot of social services associated. But the value was just hearing that at real voice, that firsthand experience of the individuals as they were trying to make their way through this. I did help increase the use of the resources because the front desk position is a paid position much of the time. So I was able to contribute that resource back to this community. I'm going to continue this assignment going forward and continue to look at ways to work with this community and to really be part of it. I'm also working with the volunteer supervisor, excuse me, to revise their front desk training guide. My background's in training, and as soon as she did the training and I looked at the materials, I suggested to her that I might be able to help them improve that for other volunteers. So I'm working on that with her now, and that's fun. So what are my reflections about what I learned? You know, my most important takeaway is simply, you know, I have to get out there. I have to work with individual groups face to face in order to really understand how groups are different, how individuals within a group are different. And even this tiny experience has been so helpful and uplifting to be with people that I hope to counsel at one time. Given my experience with this population, we definitely could see working with this group going forward. And I'm hoping I might be able to do my practicum and internship with them. As far as my attitudes and biases, you know, I don't think I had a lot of negatives. We all have our biases, but didn't have any hesitation. But what troubles me is that I live in this community. I am aware of social justice issues, and I couldn't figure out how to get involved. And so I'm so thankful for this assignment because it allowed me to do so. And then finally, you know, what of my personal beliefs is not a belief about a group, but I come away from it believing that I can have an impact, even though I'm just one person and the problem is huge and complicated. I'm very excited about the fact that I can make a difference. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And here are my references. And I thank you.